Hello everyone and welcome to my MCAA 530 presentation. This is the quality of character presentation, and for the purposes of this assignment, I decided to look at the quality of adaptability. So to give a little introduction into what this presentation will go over, will look at the role that adaptability plays in the world of sport from a coach perspective, from a sports administrator perspective, and a little bit from an athlete perspective. And it'll be broken down through the use of examples and scenarios and some research that we've looked at over the time in this course. So in terms of adaptability, what is it for its definition? Adaptability is the ability to make necessary and competent adjustments during times of change and or stress in an effort to achieve the goal of a task. I think some of the things that's very important to highlight in this definition is that it's not just the making change for the sake of making change or making adjustments because it feels like it's needed now. It's making necessary and competent adjustments during these times. Oftentimes when one's ability to show that they're adaptable arises, it's in a very stressful environment. It brings negative emotions. Being able to do the necessary and competent adjustments is what really will set apart an individual who can be adaptable in the most efficient way and someone who perhaps is not doing it the most efficient way. So why adaptability? Why should this value or quality be valued in such a high regard? Adaptability is something that is not just for the sport world, it's for professionalism and the personal sphere in general. There are so many instances as a professional that will arise that were unforeseeable, regardless of how much an individual wants to have a proactive mindset or try to be prepared for things down the road. There are things that will arise that no one had any idea were coming. It feels like these things maybe came out of nowhere. So this is something that fits into every professional sphere. It's something that's important to apply to yourself personally. So that's one of the reasons that I think applying this is of the utmost importance, especially in the professional setting. One of the things as I was doing this that I felt related very nicely with this quality was complacency. Unfortunately, I think it's very easy for professionals to find a state of complacency, to get very comfortable, to think you've seen everything, that you've experienced all the potential occurrences in your setting. And I think that's dangerous. I think it's a very detrimental place to get to. Being able to understand that there's always going to be something that will arise that was unforeseeable, that was unplanned for, I think is a quality that's very good as a professional. And leaders who can possess this and display this to those underneath them, I think it's contagious. And I think those individuals want to buy into that and apply it themselves. And it sets a healthier and more equipped workplace environment for leaders who are able to portray that to those individuals around them. In terms of examples of adaptability, a sport-related example may be a coach finding out that his or her star athlete is unable to compete now for whatever reason due to a personal issue, sickness, a disciplinary issue, something like that, where now a coach can have to make the necessary adjustments without a star player. Something outside of sports world, maybe an office's best employee quits and gives no notice. Now this office has to go out, find a new employee, and fill the void while still keeping the integrity of that office intact of that individual. These are things that will just happen that these leaders were not prepared for, and now the necessary changes has to be made in order to move forward efficiently and appropriately. In terms of a more coaching perspective and looking at it more specifically from coaching, one of the things that's an example of this could be a change in rules. Maybe officials are tightening down on the way they make calls. Maybe the three-point line has been pushed back. Being able to be prepared for anything that may change in your sport is very important, as it will only benefit your athletes to be able to explain to them exactly what the changes were that were made. I think another example for coaches that you have to deal with, especially at the collegiate level and becoming more so popular at the high school level, is athletes leaving their institution, their team, and going to pursue a different place to play. Because now there's so many changes that have to be made to fill that athlete's void, and now maybe new athletes have to take on new roles depending on who left. So applying this idea of understanding that there are things that are going to happen within your personnel, within the league, within the conference, whatever it may be, is very important, so that when those things do come, there'll be a better chance to handle them in the most appropriate way possible. In terms of coaching, more specifically, and continuing on with that idea, something that could happen could be a scheduling change. And for whatever reason, maybe it be the weather, maybe it be a lack of officials, who knows why a scheduling change may occur. Or it could be something like an athlete being unable to compete for whatever reason. It could be a coach, not being able to make it because of an instance that they were partaking in off the floor, and now it keeps them away from the staff. Anything like this is something that will test the coach's adaptability, and these are all instances that more than likely will arise. And being able to understand that and giving the chance to be in this frame of mind gives a better opportunity for when these moments come up to handle them in the most appropriate way possible. From a more administrative perspective, this could be something as hiring and firing coaches, something that has to be done out of the blue sometimes. There was no plan to fire a coach and hire a coach. This could be something like maybe the institution is now dealing with some turmoil, whether it be a rumor or truth, and maybe it's gone public and now individuals have to speak on the matter. Something like this is something that happens a lot in institutions, things that I've seen in my time working even at the Division I level. And administrators must be able to be prepared to handle these situations competently and efficiently. In terms of looking at the role of leaders in athletics, one of the things when it comes to adaptability that I really found fit well with this was this idea that as a leader in a leadership position, you represent your institution or your company, wherever you're at. You're an extension of that, and you represent it in its entirety. So for me, as an example, if I was a coach and anything that I do, if it's good, bad, it's not just going to fall back on me personally, it falls back on the institution as a whole. So in times that test adaptability, what are those environments usually? They're stressful environments. And because of the stress, maybe those leaders will make rash decisions that maybe will have negative consequence, and they might think it's just going to affect me, but in reality, it has an effect on the team, all the administrators, like I said, the institution as a whole. So being able to understand that leadership position, that when these instances occur and they require an individual to show that they're adaptable, being able to do it efficiently, calmly, and methodically is very important, as really from a leadership position, it's going to have consequences that are bigger than the individual, his or herself. As for a direct quote that I thought fit nicely, the player who has not yet learned to be an athlete yet, when it comes to accountability, will find himself blaming everyone but himself when things do not go well. More often than not, the blame will be directed towards sources out of his control, like the referees, the conditions, the size of an opponent, and the coach. Now, looking at this quote, it really is looking at accountability, right? And it really is showing, I guess, the lack of accountability or how an athlete may struggle with that. But really looking at the back half of that quote, it really looks at adaptability and label some things that require an individual to be adaptable, things that are out of one's control, like the referees, like the conditions, like the size or skill of an opponent, like the coach's decisions. From an athlete perspective, those things cannot be directly controlled or dictated. What can be controlled and dictated? My effort, my leadership, my teamwork, my attitude, things like that. Putting your energy in the right places, in the areas that will have to be tested, is important. You will have to adapt your leadership, the way you talk on the floor, things you do in a game. But things like the referees, things like the skill of the competition, crowd, there's nothing that can be done about that. And being able to adapt in the appropriate areas, I think, is another thing that's very important to understand. In terms of a Bible verse that I thought fit nicely with this, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Giving a little bit of analysis on this from a faithful perspective, it applies here as well. We should always be understanding that there are times that require us to adapt. Maybe we should even be looking to adapt. So just to give a little faithful insight there, I thought that fit nicely. And also a wise saying from Marvin J. Ashton here, adaptability cushions the impact of change as appointment. So being able to handle these instances in the most appropriate way makes the future outcomes easier to deal with, and maybe those subsequent responses will be a lot simpler to take on and to handle. So in conclusion, showing that adaptability is such an important quality, I think, is very important, as it should fit in with all the other qualities that can be discussed through this presentation. It's inevitable that coaches, leaders alike will be tested and have to prove that they are adaptable, and it is a quality that is always going to be needed in our leaders. Thank you so much for engaging in my presentation.